Chapter 5, Section 4, Achievements of Ancient China. What will the future historians call the time we live in? Will they think it was a great age? Will they praise its scientific advances, such as the computer and spaceflight? What do you think? Questions to think about as we go through this video in this section. Number 1. What role did Confucianism play in China during the Han Dynasty? And number 2. What important advances in technology were made in China during the Han Dynasty? Key term that will be defined for you through the Google Classroom is silk. And some key people and places are Su Mei Shen and the Silk Road. Please make sure to have your Google Doc out and ready to answer questions through the section. And when you have completed, make sure to submit through the Google Classroom. The caravan slowly plods across the hot sands of the Taklamakan Desert. Weary travelers wearing long robes sway on top of camels. Riderless camels are heaped high with heavy loads. Suddenly, the camels stop, huddle together and snarl viciously. An old man riding the lead camel turns around and shouts. No one can hear him because of the screaming wind drowns out his words. The man jumps from his camel and quickly wraps a strip of felt around his nose and mouth. The other travelers rush to dismount and cover their faces too. Just then, the sandstorm hits with full force. Then, as quickly as it came, the sandstorm is gone. The travelers wipe sand from their eyes and tend to their camels. They have survived just one of the many challenges traveling on the long and treacherous trade route known as the Silk Road. The Silk Road, China meets the West. The Emperor Wu Di's conquest in the West brought the Chinese into contact with the people of Central Asia. Trade with these people introduced the Chinese to such new foods as grapes, walnuts, and garlic. This exchange of goods gave rise to a new major trade route. Called the Silk Road, it ran all the way from China to the Mediterranean Sea. Follow the Silk Road as I demonstrate for you. So as you can see, the red line in both of these maps is the Silk Road. The Silk Road was not one continuous road. Rather, it was a series of routes covering more than 4,000 miles, a little less than the distance from Chicago to Hawaii. Travel along the Silk Road was hard and dangerous. The Silk Road began in northern China and went west along the Great Wall of China. Then it entered a narrow fringe of land between the barren Gobi Desert and the towering Nanshan, or the Southern Mountains. More dangerous land loomed to the west, where the Silk Road edged around the fringes of the dangerous Taklamakan Desert. Here, as you have seen, travelers faced the perils of sudden and blinding snowstorms. Once the road crossed the Paramir Mountains, travel was easier. The road passed through Persia and Mesopotamia. Finally, it turned north to the city of Antioch, in what is today Syria. From here, traders shipped goods across the Mediterranean to Rome, Greece, Egypt, and other lands that border the Mediterranean. A route for goods. Few travelers journeyed the entire length of the Silk Road. Generally, goods were passed from trader to trader as they crossed Asia. With each trade along the route, the price of the goods went up. By the time the goods arrived at the end of their journey, they were very expensive. The Silk Road got its name from silk, a valuable cloth first made only in China. Han farmers developed new methods of raising silkworms, which made the silk. Han workers found new ways to weave and dye the silk. These methods were closely guarded secrets. The penalty for revealing them was death. The arrival of silk in Europe created great excitement. Wealthy Romans prized Chinese silk and were willing to pay high prices for it. And wealthy people in China would pay well for glass, horses, ivory, woolens, and linen cloth from Rome. A route for ideas. More than goods traveled the road. New ideas did too. For example, missionaries from India traveled to China along a section of the road and brought the religion of Buddhism with them. By the time the Han Dynasty ended, Buddhism was becoming a major religion in China. Old traditions, new accomplishments. Traditional Chinese ideas flourished during the Han Dynasty. Han rulers realized that during troubled times in the past, people had lost respect for tradition. To bring back this respect, rulers encouraged people to return to the teachings of Confucius. It is also why rulers during the Han and later dynasties required members of the civil service to be educated in Confucian teachings. Language and literature. Under the Han Dynasty, the arts and scholarship flourished. Chinese poets wrote excellent poetry. Chinese scholars put together the first dictionary of Chinese language. But the greatest advancement was in the field of history. Until the time of the Han, the Chinese people had only a shadowy knowledge of their history. They knew only myths that had been passed down from generation to generation. But often these stories were in conflict with each other. No one was sure just when Chinese rulers had lived or what they had accomplished. The scholar Su Mei Chen decided to solve the problem. He spent his life writing a history of China from mythical times to the Emperor Wu Di. His work, called Historical Records, is a major source of our information about ancient China. Su Ma described his work. I wish to examine all that encircles heaven and man. I want to probe the changes of the past and the present. This chart shows just a few of the achievements of the ancient Chinese. Which two inventions were most helpful for farmers? Pause the video, think about your answer, and restart when you have come to your conclusion. Advances in technology. During the Han Dynasty, China became the most advanced civilization in the world. Its government was stable, so the Chinese could turn their attention to improving their society. Some accomplishments of the Han Dynasty are shown in the previous chart. For example, Chinese artisans began making iron farming tools. These were a great improvement over the stone hoes and plows that farmers had traditionally used. Under Han leadership, workers constructed vast irrigation systems. They developed new ways of farming. They also developed something the world still depends on every day: paper. Paper. To keep records, Mesopotamians had to carve their cuneiform characters in stone or press them into clay tablets. The Chinese had similar problems. The Chinese used wood scrolls. Later, they wrote messages and even whole books on silk. Then, around AD 105, the Chinese made one of their greatest discoveries. They invented paper. The first paper was made from tree bark, hemp, and old rags. It was strengthened with starch and then coated with a gelatin, which was a gooey substance that gave it strength. This invention influenced learning and the arts in China. After several centuries, the use of paper spread across Asia and into Europe. Eventually, paper replaced papyrus from Egypt as the material for scrolls and books. Other practical inventions. During the Han Dynasty, the Chinese invented many practical devices that did not reach Europe until centuries later. Among them were the wheelbarrow, the rudder for steering boats, and the collar and harness that allowed animals to pull heavy loads. The Han Dynasty came to an end in the 200s AD, but its accomplishments were not forgotten. People in China today call themselves the children of Han. This is the end of the section. There are a few questions you should be able to answer on top of your guided reading and notes you have been taking in your Google Doc. These are: number 1, why did the influence of Confucius grow during the Han Dynasty? 2, name 3 accomplishments of the Chinese during the Han Dynasty. And finally, what do you think was the most important achievement of ancient China and why? Please make sure that your Google Doc has been completed and submitted through the Google Classroom. Once you have done this, you are finished, and we will see you in class tomorrow. Remember, be excellent to one another.